The phone rang in the dead of night. Still groggy, I picked up, hearing my son's voice crack with panic. "Dad, impossible," he said, his words sharp with disbelief. "She's on my flight. She's not at home." Still, I didn't move, barely able to process what he'd just said. As the reality of his words settled in, I could hear the faint hum of the airplane in the background. My heart pounded in my chest, a cold realization creeping over me. Something was very wrong. That's when I knew. Everything I thought I understood about my wife was a lie. Before the story begins, tell me, where are you watching from? I hope your day's gentle and calm. Please like, subscribe, and let's start our story together. The phone rang sharply through the quiet of the night, pulling Tom Harper out of his restless sleep. He glanced at the clock, 2:17 a.m. A glance at the caller ID showed his son's name flashing across the screen. His heart skipped. Ethan. Tom swiped the phone and pressed it to his ear, trying to shake off the unease creeping up his spine. "Dad," Ethan's voice was frantic, sharp with tension. "You need to listen to me right now." Tom sat up in bed, instantly awake, the fatigue from the last few weeks momentarily forgotten. "Ethan, what's going on? Is everything okay?" There was a pause, a hesitant silence that only deepened Tom's worry. Finally, Ethan spoke again, his words tumbling out in a rush. "Mom, she's on my flight. I don't know how to explain this, but she shouldn't be. She's not supposed to be traveling. She told me she was staying home, but..." Tom's heart stopped for a beat. He ran a hand through his hair, trying to process what he was hearing. Rachel, his wife of over 30 years, had been acting increasingly distant. A strange coldness had settled between them these past few weeks, but this was something else. "Wait, slow down, Ethan. What are you saying?" I don't know how to say this, but she's been acting weird, on the flight, I mean, not like herself. She wouldn't look at me, kept looking out the window like she was avoiding something or someone. I don't think she even realized I noticed. But I did." A chill ran through Tom's veins, his stomach clenching. Rachel had been distant lately, yes, but had she been hiding something? Was she running from something? The thought gnawed at him, a slow build of dread. Did she say anything? Did she tell you anything about why she's traveling? "No," Ethan replied, his voice strained. "She just said she was going home. I didn't know what to think. It didn't add up." Tom felt a knot form in his chest. Something about this was wrong, deeper than he could understand. "I'm calling her," he said, his tone suddenly sharp, the urgency in his voice betraying the calm facade he tried to maintain. "I'll get to the bottom of this." He hung up, his hands trembling as he dialed Rachel's number. The phone rang, each chime echoing louder in the silence of the house. Tom's eyes flicked to the empty side of the bed where Rachel should have been. It had been days since they'd really spoken, but this felt different. The line clicked, and Rachel's voice came through, but it was colder than usual. "Tom, what is it?" "Rachel," Tom's voice was steady, though it cracked with the weight of his worry. "Where are you?" "Ethan says you're on a flight, but you told me you were staying home. What's going on?" There was a pause, too long before she responded, her voice evasive. "I'm at home, just resting." Tom frowned, something about her tone not sitting right. "I don't believe you. Where are you, Rachel?" he pressed, his pulse quickening. "I need to know where you are." Another silence, and then a forced chuckle on the other end of the line. "Tom, I'm fine. I'm just tired, really. I'm just resting." The words felt like they were meant to soothe, but they only deepened his suspicion. Her voice was hollow, her words too practiced. Tom's stomach twisted as the weight of everything, her secrecy, Ethan's warning, the strange distance between them these past weeks, settled over him like a blanket of dread. "I'm coming over," he said, trying to steady his voice. "We'll talk about this. I need to understand what's happening, Rachel." Before she could respond, he hung up, the sound of the dial tone reverberating through the room. Tom sat back against the headboard, his breath shallow, his thoughts a storm of confusion and fear. Something was terribly wrong. His son had sounded frantic. Rachel was lying. He could feel it in his bones, The pieces of the puzzle didn't fit together. His mind raced, trying to grasp the fragments of what was happening. Why had Rachel lied about being home? Why had she really left? Tom stared at the phone in his hand, his mind spinning, the nagging feeling of dread sinking deeper into his chest. He wanted to believe it was all just a misunderstanding, that it was nothing more than misplaced anxiety. But, deep down, he knew this was something far darker than he was prepared for. The call had ended, but the questions lingered, unresolved, gnawing at the edges of his thoughts. What was Rachel hiding? What had she really been up to? And why had Ethan felt the need to call him in the middle of the night with such urgency? Tom lay back down, but sleep wouldn't come. His mind wouldn't let him rest. Something was coming, something dangerous, and he couldn't shake the feeling that it was already too late to turn back. Tom sat in front of the small security monitor, the dim glow of the screen casting long shadows across the room. His eyes scanned the footage with a growing sense of unease. The timestamp on the bottom right flickered, marking the last few days with a cold indifference. He was looking for something, anything, that could explain Rachel's sudden disappearance. But as he fast-forwarded through the footage of their home, he found nothing. Nothing but empty rooms, and the occasional glimpse of his own silhouette walking past the camera. Rachel was nowhere to be seen. A heavy weight settled in his chest. She'd been gone for days now, and he hadn't seen her leave. No bags packed, no goodbye. It was as though she'd simply vanished into thin air. The house, once filled with the sounds of life and conversation, had been eerily quiet, save for the low hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the floorboards. His mind raced, each unanswered question adding to the mounting pressure in his skull. Where could she have gone? Why hadn't she told him anything? A knot formed in his stomach, a cold, gnawing feeling that he couldn't shake. Then, as if on cue, his phone buzzed on the table beside him. Tom picked it up, desperate for any shred of clarity. He opened his bank app, his heart racing as he scrolled through recent transactions. His eyes narrowed. There it was, a large withdrawal, a transfer of funds to an account that wasn't his. The sum was staggering, enough to make his pulse spike in alarm. Tom's hand trembled as he tapped on the transaction details, but the information was vague. No explanation, no memo, nothing to clarify what this was for. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration building. The bank account, shared between him and Rachel, had always been something they managed together. They never kept secrets about money. At least, he had never thought so. A cold chill crept up his spine as he realized just how little he actually knew about what was going on in Rachel's life these days. He had tried to push his suspicions away, but now they felt like a heavy, unavoidable truth pressing in on him from all sides. Without thinking, Tom grabbed his jacket and keys and made his way out of the house. He needed answers, and there was only one place he could think of that might give him any clarity: Ethan's apartment. He had to know if his son had any idea what was going on. The city was quieter than usual as he drove, the streets slick with a recent rain. He tried to focus on the road, but his mind kept drifting back to the images of the security footage. Where was Rachel? Why was she gone without a word? And what the hell was going on with the money? Tom arrived at Ethan's building, the towering structure looming overhead like a silent witness to the storm of questions in his mind. As he parked and stepped out of the car, he noticed the dim light flickering in the apartment hallway. Ethan answered the door quickly, looking startled to see him. "Dad? I need to talk to you," Tom interrupted, his voice more strained than he'd intended. "Is there somewhere we can sit?" Ethan hesitated for a moment before stepping aside, allowing his father to enter. Tom followed him into the small, dimly lit apartment. The air felt thick with tension, like something was hanging in the space between them, something neither of them was willing to say aloud just yet. "I went through the security footage at the house," Tom started, his voice tight. "Rachel, she's gone, Ethan. I can't find her. And I don't think she's been honest with me about where she's been." Ethan stiffened, his jaw tightening, as if bracing for the conversation he didn't want to have. "I don't know where she is, Dad. She's been distant lately, but I don't know anything about..." Before he could finish, there was a knock at the door. A young woman, probably in her 30s, appeared in the doorway. She was carrying a bag of groceries, but her expression shifted when she saw Tom standing there. "Sorry," the woman said, glancing between them. "I didn't mean to interrupt. I thought you'd want to know, Mr. Harper." Tom frowned, confused. "What is it?" The woman hesitated before speaking, her voice low. "I've seen Rachel. She left late last night, with a suitcase. She was in a hurry, but she looked—" Tom didn't wait for her to finish. He felt his chest tighten, his mind racing to put the pieces together. Rachel had left the house with a suitcase. Was she planning to leave for good? Had she been preparing to leave him for weeks, maybe months, without his knowing? The questions were piling up faster than he could process them. "Where did she go?" Tom demanded, his voice cracking slightly with the pressure of everything he was feeling. The woman seemed taken aback by his urgency, but shook her head. "I didn't see where she went. She looked upset, and she was carrying a lot of bags. I didn't want to pry." Tom turned away, feeling a cold rush of anger and helplessness. He had trusted Rachel. He had trusted his own family, and now it felt like the rug was being pulled out from under him. "Thank you," he muttered, trying to steady his breathing. As he left Ethan's apartment, his phone buzzed again. This time, it was Rachel. But the message wasn't what he expected. She hadn't responded to his last few texts. And now, nothing. No answer. No explanation. His unease grew into something darker. What was happening? What was Rachel hiding? And more importantly, why was she running? Tom made a mental note. He needed to speak to Detective Laura Jenkins. Something bigger was at play here, something he wasn't yet able to understand. But he would. He had to. As he stared at the blank screen of his phone, the knot in his stomach tightened. Tom walked into the small, dimly lit office of Detective Laura Jenkins, the familiar hum of the fluorescent lights overhead, adding to the tension in the room. It had been a few days since Rachel disappeared, but every hour felt like an eternity, every unanswered question gnawing at him. He hadn't been able to shake the feeling that something was off. His wife, his family, everything he thought he knew was slowly unraveling. "Mr. Harper," Laura greeted him with a nod, her expression hard, but not unkind. "I'm glad you came in. What's going on?" Tom sat down across from her, his hands clenched tightly in his lap. The weight of everything he'd learned, everything he suspected, made his stomach churn. "It's Rachel," he started, his voice quieter than he intended. "She's gone, and I don't know where she is. I found some strange things, odd withdrawals from our bank account, security footage with no trace of her, and Ethan told me she was on a flight of his, but she wasn't supposed to be traveling." Laura leaned forward slightly, her sharp eyes never leaving his face. "You're concerned, I get that, but you have to understand something. Before you start jumping to conclusions, you need to gather more information. People don't just disappear, not without a reason." She paused, letting the words hang in the air between them. "What else can you tell me? What's been happening with Rachel lately?" Tom hesitated, his mind running over the last few weeks. Rachel's increasingly distant behavior, the long hours she spent on the phone, the nights she'd stayed out. "She's been acting strange, distant. We've barely spoken. And then, out of nowhere, she's gone. I don't know what to make of it." Laura's gaze softened, though there was still a quiet professionalism in her tone. "I understand how unsettling this must be, but jumping to conclusions, accusing people without proof, that's what gets us into trouble. Let's take this step by step. Start with what you know. Start with Ethan." Tom's eyes narrowed at the mention of his son's name. He trusted Ethan, of course he did, but there was something about this whole situation that didn't sit right. Ethan had been the one to tell him Rachel was on his flight, but why hadn't he mentioned anything else? Why hadn't he pressed Rachel for more information? Tom didn't want to believe his son could be hiding something, but the doubt was creeping in, like a shadow that refused to leave. "I'll talk to him," Tom muttered, standing up, "but I need more. I need answers, Laura. I need to know what's really going on here." "Then go to Ethan's office," Laura suggested, her voice steady, almost reassuring. "See what he knows. But be careful, Tom. This is bigger than you think. Stay alert." Tom didn't need to be told twice. He left the detective's office with a sense of urgency burning in his chest. Every step felt heavier than the last as he made his way to Ethan's office downtown. When he arrived, the building looked like any other, cold, corporate, indifferent to the turmoil inside him. But Tom knew better now. Things weren't as simple as they seemed. Inside, Ethan's office was just as sterile as Tom remembered it. Sleek, modern furniture, and the faint scent of polished wood. But something was off. There was an emptiness in the air, a stillness that made his pulse quicken. "Hey, Mr. Harper," Maya, the flight attendant, greeted him from across the room. She had always been friendly when he'd met her during Ethan's occasional visits home, but today, there was a tension in her voice that didn't belong. "Hi, Maya," Tom replied, his voice tight. "Is Ethan here?" She glanced behind her, then back at Tom, her face faltering slightly before she gave him a thin smile. "He's not around right now, actually, but if you want, I can tell you what I know about that flight." Tom's stomach twisted. He hadn't expected this. "You know something?" Maya hesitated, her gaze flickering around the room before she lowered her voice. "It's about Rachel," she said quietly. Her words weighed with something unspoken. "She was acting strange during the flight. Nervous, distracted. I thought it was just me at first, but it was like she was avoiding looking at me, avoiding contact with everyone. She was jumpy, almost like she didn't want anyone to notice her." Tom's heart skipped. This wasn't just about a strange behavior. This was something else. "What do you mean, avoiding contact?" Maya took a deep breath, glancing nervously at the door as if making sure no one was listening. "I don't know for sure, but there was something off about her. She was looking over her shoulder, like she was scared someone was after her. And when I asked her if she was all right, she brushed it off. But I could tell something wasn't right." Tom's thoughts raced, 1,000 questions tumbling over each other. "Do you think she's in some kind of trouble?" Maya didn't say anything at first, just bit her lip before finally answering. "I don't know, Mr. Harper, but if you're asking me, I think Rachel might be involved in something bigger than you realize. Something dangerous." The words hit him like a punch to the gut. His mind spun, trying to piece together the fragments of truth Maya was hinting at, but the pieces wouldn't fit. "Has Ethan said anything about this?" Tom asked, his voice a mix of suspicion and concern. Maya's eyes flickered, and for a brief moment, Tom could see something in her expression. Guilt? Fear? "I don't know," she said softly. "But maybe you should ask him. Maybe it's time you really start asking the right questions." Tom's blood ran cold. Maya's words left a lingering taste of dread in his mouth. Could Ethan be involved in whatever Rachel was tangled in? Tom didn't want to believe it, but he had no choice but to wonder. As he left the office, Tom felt the weight of everything pressing on him. He had come looking for answers, but all he'd found were more questions. He dialed Laura's number as he walked, the sound of her voice calm but urgent on the other end. "This is bigger than you think, Tom," she warned again, her words echoing in his mind. "Stay alert. Things are about to escalate." And just like that, the quiet weight of his suspicions had turned into something darker, more dangerous. Tom's world was unraveling, and he didn't know how much longer he could keep holding on. Tom's hands trembled as he stood in the hallway, staring at the doorbell. He hadn't expected this. Not today. Not like this. Yet, here he was, feeling a growing sense of unease as he saw the tall figure of Martin Doyle standing on his doorstep. Tom had heard of Martin before. He was a businessman, someone who seemed to float just beneath the surface of the city's high-stakes financial world. But Martin wasn't the kind of person Tom typically associated with, and certainly not someone he wanted to see at his door. The doorbell rang again, pulling Tom from his thoughts. He took a breath and opened the door. "Tom, good to see you, my friend." Martin's voice was smooth, his smile a little too wide, a little too eager. His handshake was firm, the kind that made Tom uncomfortable, as if Martin were testing his grip. But Tom wasn't in the mood for pleasantries. The air felt thick with something unspoken, something off-kilter. He tried not to let it show as he stepped aside to let Martin in. "Thanks for taking the time to meet with me," Martin continued, stepping inside like he owned the place, his polished shoes tapping against the hardwood floor. He was dressed in an expensive suit, the kind that screamed success and power, and yet something about him put Tom on edge. Tom led him to the living room, trying to maintain his composure. "What's this about, Martin? I wasn't expecting a visit." Martin sat down easily, almost casually, in one of the armchairs, his eyes scanning the room, as though everything here was somehow familiar to him. I know it's a bit out of the blue, but I thought I'd drop by and have a chat. You know, see how you're holding up with everything that's been going on with Ethan." The mention of Ethan's name made Tom's stomach twist. Ethan, his son, the one who, only days ago, had called him in the middle of the night to tell him about Rachel, the same son whose financial troubles had brought Martin into their lives. Tom hadn't been happy about Ethan's ties to Martin. His business dealings were sketchy at best, and Tom hadn't liked the way Martin looked at Ethan, as if he were just another asset in a game of high stakes. "You've been keeping in touch with Ethan, I take it?" Tom asked, his voice careful, watching Martin closely. "Of course," Martin said, his smile never fading. "We've had a few conversations. He's a good kid, just caught up in some difficult circumstances, but I'm sure you already know that." Tom nodded, but his mind was racing. Ethan's financial struggles had escalated recently, and Tom had no idea just how deep his son was into the mess. He had a sinking feeling Martin knew a lot more about it than he was letting on. "Look," Martin continued, leaning forward, his tone suddenly more serious. "I know things aren't easy for you right now. I just wanted to check in on you, see how you're holding up with everything going on. Family's important, right?" His eyes gleamed, as though he were enjoying the discomfort that hung in the air. Tom didn't trust him. Something was off. "You've been involved with Ethan for a while now, but I don't understand why you're here, Martin. What exactly do you want?" Martin chuckled softly, an almost dismissive sound, like Tom was overreacting. "Nothing sinister, I assure you. Just a friendly visit. But speaking of family..." He paused for a moment, his eyes narrowing as if considering his next words carefully. "I did see Rachel the other day." Tom froze, the hair on the back of his neck standing up. He tried to keep his expression neutral, but his heart was pounding in his chest. "Rachel? What do you mean? When did you see her?" Martin leaned back in the chair, his posture casual, but there was a glint of something in his eyes, something Tom couldn't quite place. "Oh, just a private meeting, an upscale part of the city. We were discussing business, nothing unusual, but I thought it was interesting that she was there. Didn't strike me as someone who'd normally be in that kind of environment. But then again, people surprise you, don't they?" Tom's throat tightened as the weight of Martin's words sunk in. Rachel, in a private meeting, in an upscale part of the city. What the hell was she involved in? Why hadn't she told him? And why had she lied about where she was? The pieces began to shift, but they didn't fit. Tom's mind raced, trying to make sense of it all. Rachel's strange behavior, her sudden disappearance, and now Martin, sitting there, so casually, talking about seeing her like it was nothing. He could feel the floor beneath him starting to crack. The solid ground of trust and understanding he thought he had with his wife, splintering into something darker and more dangerous. "Why didn't you tell me about this earlier?" Tom's voice was a bit sharper now, the calmness slipping. "Why are you telling me this now, Martin?" Martin's expression didn't change. He gave a small shrug, as if the question was trivial. "Oh, no real reason. Just thought you'd want to know, considering everything that's going on. It's a small world, Tom. People bump into each other all the time, especially in this city." He stood up then, adjusting his jacket with a smooth motion. "Anyway, I won't keep you. Just wanted to pass along the information. Hope everything works out for you and your family." Tom watched him leave, his mind a blur of confusion and dread. As the door clicked shut behind him, he stood there for a long moment, his thoughts spiraling. Rachel, what was she doing? What was she mixed up in? Tom's pulse was still racing as he walked toward the door, his mind made up. He had to know. Whatever Rachel was hiding, whatever Martin knew, he was going to find out. And nothing would stop him from digging deeper into his wife's secret life, no matter where it led. As he stood there, staring at the door, a deep sense of foreboding washed over him. What was Rachel involved in? And how far would this rabbit hole go? Tom sat at the kitchen table, his laptop open in front of him. The dim light from the overhead fixture cast long shadows across the room, but he barely noticed. His mind was focused entirely on the bank statements he had pulled up, pages and pages of numbers that didn't make sense. The more he looked at them, the more a pit formed in his stomach. Large sums of money had been moved from their joint account, some to places he couldn't trace, others into mysterious, unnamed accounts. There were transfers, withdrawals, and deposits that all seemed to lead nowhere. He clicked through the transactions again, his heart pounding. There was no explanation for any of it. He had always trusted Rachel with their finances, and now it felt like that trust had been ripped apart. This wasn't just a mistake or a series of oversights. This was something deliberate, something planned. Tom's hands were shaking as he scrolled further down the list. The figures were staggering, large amounts of cash being siphoned off piece by piece from their savings. But that wasn't the worst part. As he dug deeper, he uncovered a separate bank account, one that Rachel had opened without his knowledge. The account wasn't linked to their joint finances. There were no joint signatures, no mention of it in their usual discussions. It was like a hidden life, a life that Tom knew nothing about. His breath hitched in his throat as he leaned back in his chair. He had always thought Rachel was the one constant in their lives, the steady anchor when everything else felt chaotic. But now, all he saw was a woman who had been hiding something from him, something that was far darker than he could have imagined. The betrayal twisted inside him, a sharp, jagged pain that he couldn't shake. His mind raced. How long had this been going on? What was Rachel involved in? And more importantly, why hadn't she told him? Why had she kept this a secret? His thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. Tom didn't need to guess who it was. Ethan, his son. The one person he had been trying to avoid confronting because he knew what was coming. He knew that the question of Ethan's involvement in all of this was hanging in the air like an unspoken accusation. Tom stood, feeling the weight of the moment. He opened the door, and there stood Ethan, looking every bit the part of a man who had been caught in the crossfire of something he didn't quite understand. Ethan's eyes flicked nervously as he stepped inside, but he didn't speak immediately. Tom could feel the tension in the room before the words were even said. "I found something," Tom said, his voice low, tight with the anger and confusion he had been holding back. "A separate bank account, Ethan, one that Rachel opened without telling me. What do you know about this?" Ethan stiffened, his face going pale as his eyes shifted away. I don't know what you're talking about, Dad. I didn't know about any bank account. Why would she do that?" Tom's eyes narrowed, the doubt creeping in. "Don't lie to me, Ethan. I've been going through the records, and it doesn't make sense. Money's been moved, large sums, and it's all leading back to something I can't trace. Why hasn't Rachel told me anything about this?" Ethan's hands shifted uncomfortably at his sides. "I don't know, okay? She's been acting strange lately, but I don't know anything about her finances, I swear." Tom felt the familiar flicker of frustration. He had always trusted Ethan. He had always believed that his son was straightforward, that there was nothing to hide between them. But now, with every word that came out of Ethan's mouth, Tom could feel the foundation of that trust eroding. Ethan wasn't telling him something, and Tom wasn't sure if it was because he didn't know the whole truth or because he was hiding it. The tension in the room thickened. Tom's voice hardened as he stepped closer to his son. "I need you to be honest with me, Ethan. This isn't just about Rachel anymore. This is about our entire family's future. You've been caught up in something that's much bigger than either of us. I need to know where you stand in all of this." Ethan flinched at the accusation, his eyes darting nervously. He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Instead, he just shook his head and muttered, "I don't know what's going on, I swear." Tom stood there for a moment, trying to read his son's face, searching for any hint of truth. But all he saw was confusion and fear, and Tom wasn't sure if it was because Ethan truly had no answers or because he was too deep into something dangerous to tell him. With a frustrated exhale, Tom turned away from Ethan and grabbed his phone. He had to call someone. He had to get answers, no matter how painful they might be. He couldn't do this alone anymore. He dialed Detective Laura Jenkins' number, the weight of everything pressing down on him. She picked up on the second ring. "Detective Jenkins," she answered, her voice calm like she had been expecting his call. "It's Tom Harper," he said, his voice tight. "I need your help. I've found something that doesn't make sense. Rachel's been hiding money, and I think this whole thing is connected to her disappearance. I need you to look into it, now." There was a pause on the other end, a shift in the atmosphere as Detective Jenkins processed his words. "I'll get on it, Mr. Harper. Stay patient. We'll figure this out." Tom ended the call, his stomach twisting in knots. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was standing on the edge of something massive, something far bigger than he could handle alone. The walls were closing in, and the more he uncovered, the more he realized how deep this went. The answers were just out of reach, and all Tom could do was wait and hope that the truth didn't destroy everything he had left. Tom's eyes were fixed on the map displayed on his laptop screen, the dim glow of the monitor casting shadows across the room. He'd spent hours tracing Rachel's movements, piecing together the scattered breadcrumbs of her secret life. It wasn't easy. Her trail was careful, calculated, but slowly, he was starting to see a pattern, a location outside the city, an address that didn't mean anything to him, but meant everything to her. Tom's stomach tightened as he stared at the street view, an old industrial area, the kind of place that didn't attract attention, the kind of place you went to when you didn't want to be found. He'd been putting this off for days, telling himself that Rachel would come back, that there had to be some simple explanation for her disappearance. But the more he uncovered, the more his gut told him it wasn't that simple. Rachel was hiding something, and so was Ethan. Taking a deep breath, Tom grabbed his coat and headed out, the weight of uncertainty hanging heavy on his chest. The drive to the location felt endless, each mile feeling longer than the last. His mind kept circling back to the same thoughts. What was Rachel involved in? Why hadn't she come to him with her problems? Why had she kept him in the dark for so long? His hand gripped the steering wheel tighter, the tightness in his chest spreading with each unanswered question. When Tom arrived, the location wasn't what he expected. A dilapidated warehouse stood at the end of a narrow street, its windows boarded up, the air thick with the scent of decay. This was no place for a woman like Rachel. Tom's heart pounded as he parked his car a few blocks away, his breath fogging the windshield as he stared at the building. His pulse quickened, the pit in his stomach growing heavier. He knew this place, not in a personal sense, but through the rumors that had floated around the city. This was a place that Martin Doyle was connected to, one of the few places he had dealings that were kept behind closed doors. And now, Rachel was here. Tom's phone buzzed, breaking him out of his thoughts. He glanced at the screen. Maya. He'd been trying to reach her for days, but she'd been evasive. It didn't take long to figure out why. "Tom," Maya's voice was urgent, tight with concern. "You need to know something. Ethan's deeper into this than you realize. It's not just his business troubles. He's tied to something bigger, something dangerous." Tom's stomach dropped. "What are you talking about? What's going on with Ethan?" She paused, as if deciding how much to reveal. "I don't have all the details, but it's not just debts. Ethan's been involved with Martin Doyle's associates, and it's more than just bad business decisions. He's in way over his head. And now, I'm not sure anyone's getting out of this unscathed." The words hit him like a punch to the gut. His son was involved with Martin Doyle, the Martin Doyle, the very same man who had been lurking at the edges of his family's financial problems. The man who, Tom now realized, was more dangerous than he could have ever imagined. "I need to talk to Ethan," Tom muttered, his voice shaking with a mix of anger and disbelief. Maya's warning weighed heavily on him, but he couldn't wait any longer. His son needed to be confronted. The truth had to come out, no matter how painful it would be. Tom's hands tightened around the steering wheel as he drove back to Ethan's apartment, his mind racing. When he arrived, he didn't bother knocking. He wasn't interested in pleasantries or explanations. He needed the truth, now. Ethan was pacing the living room, his face a mask of guilt and fear. He looked up when Tom entered, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence between them was thick, suffocating. "Dad!" Ethan's voice cracked, his eyes darting away from Tom's gaze. "I didn't want you to find out like this." Tom stepped forward, his voice low and dangerous. "Find out what, Ethan? That you've been lying to me? That you're neck deep in debts you can't pay off? What the hell is going on?" Ethan's face contorted with a mix of shame and frustration. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing again. "I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't want you to know. I was trying to fix it, but it kept getting worse." His words came out in a rush, like he was finally admitting something that had been eating at him for months. "I've been hiding massive debts, Dad. Business venture gone wrong. I thought I could turn it around, but I couldn't. I've been in way over my head." Tom's chest tightened as the weight of Ethan's confession settled over him. "You've been hiding this from me, from your mother. How long, Ethan? How long have you been keeping this from us?" Ethan's voice dropped to a whisper. "A year, maybe more. But that's not all. I didn't want to tell you, but Rachel was trying to help. She was trying to protect us. She took out a loan, Dad. I didn't know about it until recently, but she's been working with people, dangerous people, trying to secure something to fix everything. She thought it would solve it. She thought it would save us." Tom's mind reeled. Rachel had been involved in something so deep, so dangerous, and she hadn't told him. He felt the sting of betrayal like a physical blow. Why hadn't she come to him? Why had she chosen to hide this from him? The questions felt endless, and the deeper he dug, the darker the answers became. Ethan's confession left Tom torn. Part of him wanted to believe his son, that he hadn't known the full extent of Rachel's involvement. But another part of him wondered if there was more to the story. Was Ethan hiding something too? Tom stood there, staring at Ethan, the weight of the situation bearing down on him. "I need to know everything, Ethan. I need to know what's really going on here. I'm going to find out the truth, no matter what it costs me." As Tom turned to leave, a cold chill settled in his chest. He was no longer just searching for Rachel. He was searching for a truth that could destroy everything he had ever known. And that truth was still out there, waiting to be uncovered. Tom's grip on the steering wheel tightened as he drove, his knuckles turning white under the strain. His mind raced, replaying every moment leading up to this. The strange behavior, the missing money, the lies Rachel had woven so carefully around him. Every unanswered question, every flicker of doubt had led him here, to this address. The place Rachel had been hiding, the place he hoped would give him some kind of clarity, but deep down, he knew it wouldn't. Whatever he was about to find, it wasn't going to be good. As he pulled into the narrow street, the house loomed ahead. A modest, aging structure, far from the upscale places Rachel usually favored. The neighborhood was quiet, too quiet. No lights in the windows, no cars parked along the curb. It almost felt like the entire street was holding its breath. Tom's heart pounded as he parked the car, the weight of what was to come settling heavily on his chest. The door to the house was locked, as expected, but there was something else, something he wasn't prepared for. He noticed the faint marks on the frame, the splinters around the edges, the unmistakable signs of forced entry. His breath caught in his throat. Rachel hadn't just left. Something had happened here. She hadn't just walked away on her own accord. Tom reached for the door handle, his mind racing with the implications of what he was seeing. But before he could turn it, his phone buzzed in his pocket, jolting him out of his thoughts. The screen flashed with Maya's name. Without thinking, he answered. "Tom, listen to me." Maya's voice was urgent, her tone sharp, making the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. "There are people looking for you. You need to leave. Now." Tom's stomach dropped. "What? Who? What do you mean, people looking for me?" "I can't explain right now," Maya continued, her words coming quickly. "But it's connected to Martin Doyle. He's involved, Tom. I don't know how deep it goes, but they're coming for you. You need to get out of there." Tom's heart hammered in his chest, his pulse quickening. Panic clawed at him, but there was something else, a growing sense of determination. He couldn't turn back now. He had come this far. He had to face Rachel, whatever the cost. "I'm not leaving," he said, his voice hardening. "I'm here for answers. If this is a trap, then so be it. I'm not running." There was a brief silence on the other end of the line, and then Maya's voice softened, tinged with concern. Just be careful, Tom. Whatever you're walking into, it's bigger than you think. Tom ended the call, slipping the phone back into his pocket. His eyes returned to the door in front of him, the strange, cold feeling of dread sinking deeper into his bones. He didn't know who was after him or what they wanted, but he couldn't let fear control him. Not now. He had to find Rachel. He had to know what she had done, what she was hiding. There was no turning back now. With a deep breath, Tom pushed the door open, the hinges creaking in protest. The house smelled stale, unused, but there was something off about it, like someone had been here recently and left in a hurry. He moved cautiously, his footsteps echoing in the empty space. The hallway was dark, save for the thin strip of light coming from a crack beneath a door at the end. Rachel's door. He moved toward it, every step heavier than the last. His pulse quickened as he reached for the knob. He wasn't sure what he was expecting to find, but the door didn't open easily. There was resistance, something blocking it from the inside. He shoved his shoulder against it, forcing the door open just wide enough to peer inside. What he saw stopped him dead in his tracks. The room was a mess. Papers scattered everywhere, overturned furniture, a sense of chaos that felt alien in a place that should have been Rachel's sanctuary. But it wasn't just the disarray that unnerved him. It was the sense that Rachel hadn't been here for a while. There was no sign of her, no personal belongings left behind, just an overwhelming feeling of abandonment. A cold chill swept over Tom as he stepped inside, scanning the room, his heart sinking with every glance. What happened here? His mind was spinning when he heard a voice from behind him. Tom! He turned sharply to find Rachel standing in the doorway, her face pale, eyes wide with a mix of fear and guilt. She looked different, broken, almost, as if the woman he had known for years was no longer standing in front of him. Rachel! His voice cracked, the weight of everything crashing down on him. What's going on? What have you done? Rachel's eyes flickered with pain, her breath shallow. Tom, please, just listen. Listen, he snapped, his voice rising with a mix of anger and disbelief. I've been looking for you, Rachel. You've lied to me about everything. The money, the accounts, the secrets you've been keeping. And now, I find you here, in a place like this, with them. What is this? What have you gotten involved in? Tears welled in Rachel's eyes, but she didn't look away. It was all for Ethan, Tom, all of it. I didn't want you to know, but I had to protect him. I had to protect our family's future. Tom's stomach twisted at her words. Protect him? You've put us all in danger, Rachel. What have you done? Who are these people? She took a step forward, her hands trembling as she reached for him. It wasn't supposed to be like this. I got involved with Martin Doyle. I thought I could fix it, get the loan, get the money we needed. But it went wrong. It spiraled out of control. I didn't know how to stop it. Tom's mind raced, 1,000 conflicting emotions tearing through him. Betrayal, grief, fear. You've been lying to me for months. I don't even know who you are anymore. Rachel's voice broke. I never wanted this. I never wanted to hurt you. Please, Tom, you have to understand. I did it all for us. For Ethan. To save him. Tom was left reeling, the weight of her confession crashing over him. He didn't know what to believe. His heart screamed to protect his family, but his mind kept telling him to go to the authorities. The question hung in the air like a knife between them. What would he do next? He stood frozen, torn between love and justice, the choice before him impossible to make. Tom's hands clenched around the steering wheel as he drove, his mind replaying the conversation he'd just had with Rachel. Her confession had torn through him, but nothing could have prepared him for what he was about to hear. Nothing could have prepared him for what was standing between him and the truth. Martin Doyle's name had been a shadow in their lives for months, but now the man himself was standing in front of him, smiling, confident, completely unfazed by the storm he'd caused. Tom's heart pounded in his chest as he parked the car in front of the sleek, imposing office building. This was it, the confrontation. Tom stepped out, his pulse quickening with every step as he entered the building. Martin's office was just as pristine as the man himself, cold, polished, and utterly devoid of warmth. Martin stood by the window, looking out at the city below, as if he owned it all. When he turned to face Tom, there was no hint of apology, no recognition of the devastation he'd caused, just a slight tilt of his head, a knowing smile on his lips. "Mr. Harper," Martin greeted him smoothly. "I've been expecting you. Please, take a seat." Tom's jaw clenched. "Cut the bullshit, Doyle. I know what you've been doing. You've been using my wife to launder money through our family's accounts, and now you've dragged my son into it." "How far does this go?" Martin's smile never wavered. He stepped forward, as if casually strolling through the wreckage he'd left behind. "It's not personal, Tom. This is just business. Your wife came to me for help, and I gave it to her. I think you'll find that Rachel's involvement was voluntary." "Voluntary?" Tom's voice cracked with the weight of his anger. "Rachel didn't ask for this. You manipulated her. You knew exactly what she was doing. You knew she'd drag us all into this." Martin's eyes glinted with something darker, something Tom hadn't seen before. "She wasn't the only one, Tom. Ethan's been involved too, hasn't he? His little financial troubles were nothing more than the beginning. Now he's in deep, and there's no way out." Tom's stomach twisted at the mention of his son. Ethan had been hiding something for months, but hearing Martin say it out loud made it real in a way that no conversation had. Ethan, his own son, was wrapped up in something far worse than a few bad investments. Martin continued, almost enjoying the discomfort he was causing. "Ethan owes a lot of money, Tom, more than he can ever repay, and now, well, he's part of the whole operation. The money that's been funneled through your accounts, that's all tied up with the deals Ethan's been involved in. And believe me, there's no way out now." The words hit Tom like a punch to the gut. He felt the world around him start to spin, the betrayal sinking deeper into his bones. His own flesh and blood, his son, was caught in this mess. His head spun with the implications of everything he'd just heard, the shock of Rachel's actions, the devastation of Ethan's involvement. It was too much to process at once. "You're a coward," Tom growled, taking a step closer. "You've been using my family for your own gain, and now you want to drag us all down with you." Martin raised an eyebrow, unfazed. "It's just business, Tom. It was never personal." Tom's fists clenched, but he held back. He couldn't afford to lose control now. He needed answers, not violence, not yet at least. He turned, fighting the urge to walk out. He needed to make a decision. The weight of the conversation and everything that followed pressed heavily on him. This wasn't just about a few bad choices anymore. His family, the very people he had loved and protected for years, were now tangled in a web that threatened to destroy them all. As he left Martin's office, a cold realization began to settle in his chest. He couldn't trust Rachel. He couldn't trust Ethan. The lies, the secrets, the betrayal. It all felt like too much to bear. But even then, a part of him couldn't shake the feeling that he had to protect them, that he had to fix this, no matter the cost. Tom returned home and immediately started freezing the family's financial accounts. He wasn't going to let Martin Doyle drain them any further. Every click of the mouse, every phone call to the bank, felt like a small victory, but it wasn't enough. There was so much more to do, so many lies to untangle. The financial web Doyle had spun around his family was far more complex than Tom had ever imagined. As he sat in front of his computer, staring at the screen, a deep fatigue settled over him. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about his family's future, and whether or not he could save them from the mess they were all now caught in. The toll it had taken on him was visible, his face drawn, his shoulders heavy with the weight of responsibility. Trust had been shattered. Love had been fractured. The phone rang, and Tom glanced at the caller ID. Detective Jenkins. He picked up, his voice barely a whisper. "Tom, things are about to escalate." Laura's voice crackled through the phone. "We need to act fast. The people Martin Doyle's connected to, they're getting restless, and they'll do whatever it takes to protect their interests." Tom's chest tightened. "I know. I'm already taking steps. But I need to make a decision, Laura. I need to decide what to do next, whether to go to the police or handle it on my own. But every choice feels like the wrong one." There was a pause on the other end. And then Laura's voice came again, low and serious. "Whatever you decide, Tom, you need to act fast. This isn't just about your family anymore. It's about survival." Tom hung up, the weight of her words settling like a stone in his stomach. He had no more time to waste. The decision had to be made. Would he protect his family or let the law take its course? But deep down, he knew he couldn't keep living in the shadows of his own family's betrayal. Whatever happened next, he had to face the truth and prepare for whatever was coming his way. Tom stood in the dimly lit living room, his mind racing. The walls felt like they were closing in on him, the weight of his family's secrets bearing down with suffocating pressure. His phone buzzed again, and for the 100th time that day, he glanced at the screen, hoping for something, anything, that would help him make sense of this mess. But it was always the same. Texts from Ethan, cryptic and full of half-truths, emails from the bank, warning of suspicious activity. And then, finally, the one call he had been dreading. Detective Laura Jenkins. "Tom, you need to understand something." Laura's voice was sharp, urgent. "Martin Doyle doesn't just operate on a local level. He's connected to people far more powerful than we realized. This is bigger than your family's financial problems. There are people coming for you now. They're hunting you." The words hit Tom like a hammer. Hunting you. He felt the blood drain from his face. He'd been trying to hold it together, to protect his family, but now the stakes had changed. They weren't just in financial trouble. No, this was something far darker. Something that would destroy them all if he didn't act fast. How deep does this go? Tom's voice was barely a whisper, but the gravity of the situation was unmistakable. Laura hesitated. "I'm still working on it, but it's clear now. Doyle's connections aren't just people he owes money to. He's tied to organized crime, corrupt officials, money laundering on a global scale. Your family's been caught in the middle of something that has international consequences, and they'll do whatever it takes to silence you and anyone connected to you." Tom's chest tightened. He was trapped, with no way out. The walls were closing in, and the only people who could help him, the only people he cared about, were already too deep in this mess. His thoughts turned to Ethan, his son, the boy he'd raised with such care. Ethan had been part of this all along, and Tom had trusted him. Had he known what they were really doing? Had he been blind to the truth all this time? His mind snapped back to the present as the door creaked open. Ethan stood there, his face drawn with exhaustion and guilt, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. Tom looked at his son, seeing the boy he had raised, but also something else, something darker. Ethan was in over his head. "I didn't know how bad it was, Dad," Ethan muttered, his voice low, almost broken. "I swear, I thought it was just some bad investments. I never realized I was getting pulled into something like this." Tom's heart ached at his son's words, but the anger was still there, simmering beneath the surface. How could Ethan have been so blind? The sense of betrayal was overwhelming, and yet there was a part of Tom that wanted to believe him, that wanted to believe his son was just a victim in all of this. "You were involved in a scam, Ethan. A huge one," Tom said, his voice hardening. "And now we're all paying the price for it. Do you have any idea how dangerous this is?" Ethan looked down, his guilt evident. "I didn't know how deep I was in until it was too late. By then, I was in so far, there was no turning back. I thought I could fix it, but I can't. And now, now they're coming for us, aren't they?" Tom felt the weight of those words sink in. They're coming for us. The reality of it all, the fact that this was no longer just a financial nightmare, but a fight for their lives, hit him like a freight train. The pressure was mounting. Every choice felt like it would lead to disaster. "I'm getting closer to the truth," Tom said, his jaw clenched. "I need to know exactly what happened. I need you to come clean, Ethan. All of it. The only way we move forward is if we face everything together. Do you understand?" Ethan nodded, his eyes filled with tears. "I understand, Dad. I'll tell you everything. I didn't know how to fix it before, but I'll help. I'll do whatever it takes to make it right." Tom let out a heavy sigh. He didn't know if he could trust his son anymore, but right now, he didn't have a choice. If they were going to get out of this, they had to work together. They had to put everything on the table, no matter how painful it would be. The phone buzzed again, pulling him from his thoughts. It was a text from Maya. I know where Rachel is. I know what she's planning next. Tom's breath caught in his throat. This was it. Rachel had been hiding from him, from everyone. But now, finally, he had the lead he needed. He read the message again. Maya had uncovered something crucial. Tom's heart pounded as he realized that Rachel was about to make a move that could change everything. But was it too late? Had Rachel already gone too far to come back? Where is she? Tom muttered under his breath. He needed to know. He had to find her before it was too late. But as the pieces began to fall into place, another thought crossed his mind. If this was all part of Martin Doyle's plan, could he stop it? The stage was set for the final confrontation, but the path ahead was unclear. Tom knew that the endgame was coming, and when it did, it would either destroy his family or tear them apart beyond repair. Tom sat in the dim light of the office, the tension in the air so thick he could almost taste it. Detective Laura Jenkins was beside him, her eyes scanning through the final pieces of the puzzle they'd been piecing together for weeks. His hands clenched into fists as the full weight of what they'd uncovered settled over him. Martin Doyle wasn't just a businessman. He wasn't just a manipulative schemer who dragged his family into his mess. No, this went far deeper than that. Tom and Laura had followed the breadcrumbs, traced the money, and pulled the strings. But now, it was all too clear. Martin Doyle was connected to organized crime, a criminal network that spanned continents. This wasn't just about money laundering or debt. This was about something far more dangerous, something that could cost Tom everything. Doyle's connections are deeper than we thought. Laura's voice broke through Tom's spiraling thoughts. It's not just him. This whole operation has ties to international syndicates, people who won't hesitate to do anything to protect their interests. Tom's heart pounded in his chest as the pieces locked into place. This wasn't a game anymore. This was war, and his family had been caught in the crossfire. He rubbed his temples, trying to clear the fog in his head. Ethan, his son, had been involved, deeply involved, without fully understanding the implications of his actions. Rachel had tried to protect them, but in doing so, she'd put them all at risk. Tom had trusted them both, and now he felt the sting of betrayal in every part of his being. But the truth was undeniable. This was bigger than him. It was bigger than anything he could have ever imagined. His phone buzzed in his pocket, breaking the silence. He looked at the screen, seeing Ethan's name flash across. He'd been dreading this call, but it had to come. Tom picked up, his voice a mix of frustration and sorrow. Ethan? Dad. Ethan's voice was shaky, filled with regret. I didn't know it would go this far. I never meant for any of this to happen. Tom's heart wrenched. He could hear the pain in his son's voice, the weight of the regret hanging between them like a thick fog. But Tom couldn't afford to feel sorry for him. Not now. Ethan, you're in deep. You've been hiding from the truth, and now it's caught up with you. You need to come clean. There's no going back from this. Ethan was silent for a moment, the tension stretching between them. I know, Dad. I'm too far in. But I swear, I never thought it would be like this. I didn't understand the depth of it. I thought I could fix it. Now, I don't know how to get out. Tom closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. His son was lost, and he was the one who had to find him, if there was even a way out. We'll figure this out, but you need to trust me, Ethan. You need to help me stop Doyle before it's too late. The conversation ended there, but Tom's mind kept racing. Ethan was too deep in debt, tangled up in a world that was beyond his control. The only option now was to confront Martin Doyle, face to face, and bring him down. It was a dangerous move, but Tom had no choice. His family's future depended on it. Maya had been a crucial ally in all of this. She'd helped him track Doyle's movements, uncover the hidden connections, and even assisted in setting up a sting operation that would trap Doyle and his associates. If everything went according to plan, this could be the end of the line for Doyle. But Tom knew it was a risk. One wrong move, and everything would come crashing down. The night of the operation arrived, and Tom stood outside the location, his heart pounding in his chest. He was nervous, yes, but more than that, he was resolute. This was his last chance to save his family, to salvage what was left. The operation had to succeed. There could be no more mistakes. Inside, the atmosphere was tense, the air thick with anticipation. Tom was in position, ready to do what he had to. Maya's voice crackled through his earpiece, confirming that Doyle was inside, surrounded by his men. Tom's breath hitched. This was it. As he entered the building, he saw Martin Doyle standing there, as calm and collected as ever, like he wasn't about to lose everything. Tom's hand went to his side, where he could feel the weight of the gun, a tool he hoped never to use. But tonight, he might have no choice. "Doyle," Tom's voice was low, steady. "It's over." Doyle turned slowly, a smile playing at the corners of his lips. "You think you've won? You think you can just walk in here and take everything from me? It's too late, Tom. You're already in the game. You're just too blind to see it." Tom felt a cold shiver run down his spine, but he didn't flinch. "No, Doyle. It's you who's lost. It ends tonight." The sting operation moved into full effect, and within moments, the police arrived, sweeping in from all sides. Tom stood still, watching as Doyle's associates were taken into custody, the chaos unfolding before him. But even as the operation was successful, Tom couldn't shake the weight of the emotional cost. The toll it had taken on his family, the lies, the betrayal, the devastation, was unbearable. As Doyle was cuffed and led away, Tom stood there, his chest tight. The truth had finally come out. His family had been involved in something dark and dangerous, and now they had to face the consequences. But as he watched Doyle disappear into the back of a police car, Tom knew one thing for sure. This wasn't over. It was just the beginning. And whatever happened next, his family would never be the same again. The full extent of the betrayal had been revealed. But the emotional scars, the fallout, it was only just beginning. Tom's heart sank as he realized that the real battle wasn't over yet. The future was still uncertain. And the cost of everything they'd lost was something they would carry with them forever. Tom sat in the sterile, polished conference room, the heavy scent of leather chairs and paper filling the air. He could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on him, suffocating him with every breath he took. Across from him, Liam Carter, a seasoned attorney specializing in asset protection, was flipping through a stack of legal papers, his face calm, professional, as if the world wasn't crumbling around them. "We need to act fast, Tom," Liam said, his voice low and measured. "The longer you wait, the more damage Martin Doyle and his associates can do. Freezing your financial accounts is the first step. It's the only way to stop them from bleeding you dry." Tom's fingers drummed restlessly on the table, his thoughts racing. Freezing his accounts meant cutting off all access to his and Rachel's savings, the money they had worked so hard to build, the life they had created. But it was also the only way to prevent Doyle's grip from tightening further. He didn't trust anyone anymore, especially not after what had come to light about Ethan's involvement in the mess. The weight of it all was almost too much to bear. "I know it's the right move," Tom said, his voice strained. "But this is my family, Liam. If I freeze the accounts, that cuts them off too. Rachel, Ethan, they'll suffer. I don't know if I can do that to them." Liam's eyes softened, but his tone remained firm. "I understand, but you need to protect yourself first. They've already put you in a position where you're a target. There's no room for sentiment here, Tom. This is about your safety and making sure that you don't lose everything you've worked for." Tom clenched his jaw, feeling the sting of betrayal slice through him. Ethan, his son, the same boy who had been caught in the crossfire, his debts spiraling out of control. Tom wanted to protect him, wanted to believe that his son hadn't understood the full scope of the disaster he'd helped create. But the reality was there, as sharp and clear as the reflection in the glass across from him. Ethan had been complicit, and now Tom was faced with a choice that no father should ever have to make. Liam continued, his words cutting through the chaos in Tom's mind. "We'll also need to prepare a restraining order. A quiet one, just to be safe. Doyle's people won't hesitate to make things personal if they feel threatened. It's better to be proactive." Tom rubbed a hand across his face, feeling the exhaustion weighing on him like an anchor. A restraining order. That would make things real. It would mean acknowledging how far Martin Doyle's reach went, how deep the corruption ran. The idea of having to live in fear, of constantly looking over his shoulder, it made his stomach churn. But Liam was right. It was the only way. "I'll do it," Tom said, his voice hoarse with emotion. "But it doesn't feel right. This whole thing, it doesn't feel real. It's like I'm caught in a nightmare that I can't wake up from." Liam nodded, his expression unreadable. "I get it. But right now, you don't have the luxury of doubt. This isn't just about saving your money. It's about saving your life." Tom leaned back in his chair, feeling a cold wave of reality wash over him. He thought of Rachel, of her tear-streaked face when she admitted her role in everything. And Ethan. Ethan's regret, his apologies, his desperate need to make things right. But how could Tom protect them if they hadn't even protected themselves? How could he save his family when they had already burned all their bridges? "I'm sorry," Tom muttered to no one in particular, the guilt settling in his gut like a stone. "I've failed them both, and now I have to tear everything apart just to keep us safe." Liam's voice broke through Tom's thoughts. "You haven't failed anyone, Tom. You're doing the right thing. It's not about what's fair. It's about survival. And you can't help anyone if you don't look out for yourself first." Tom nodded, but the weight of his guilt didn't lift. If anything, it grew heavier. He hadn't wanted this. He hadn't wanted any of it. The financial ruin, the secrets, the lies. But now, he had no choice. He had to protect what was left. The law was his only ally now, and the choice had been made. As he left Liam's office, the paperwork for the restraining order and the account freezes in hand, Tom felt the full weight of what he'd just agreed to. The plan was set in motion. But the emotional cost was high, far higher than he'd ever anticipated. Ethan's debts were mounting by the day, and Tom could see the strain in his son's eyes. Ethan had always been his pride, his future. Now, Tom couldn't even be sure if he was still the same person, or if the boy he loved had become someone else entirely. That night, as Tom prepared the necessary legal filings, the weight of it all pressed in on him. He couldn't stop thinking about the mess Ethan had created, about Rachel's involvement, about the deceit that had led them all here. His family, the people he'd loved most, had pulled him into a nightmare he couldn't escape. He stared at the computer screen, feeling numb as he typed out the final details for the restraining order. But even as he filled in the paperwork, he knew one thing for certain. No matter what happened next, nothing would ever be the same. Ethan's debts weren't just numbers anymore. They were real, and the consequences were about to hit hard. Tom's heart sank as he thought of his son, trapped in a web of his own making, with no way out. And Tom wasn't sure if he could protect him from the storm that was coming. The clock was ticking. The game was on. But even as Tom took the next steps, he couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. Tom sat in the quiet of his living room, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound breaking the silence. Detective Laura Jenkins' words echoed in his mind, replaying over and over, a controlled confrontation with Ethan. It was the only way to get the truth, to unravel the mess his son had gotten into. But could Tom really go through with it? Could he face the son he'd raised, the son he'd trusted, knowing what he now knew? He leaned forward, staring at the phone in his hands. The thought of confronting Ethan made his stomach churn, but he had no choice. The layers of lies, the money stolen, the debts. His family was crumbling. There was no way out but to face the truth. "I'll do it," Tom said to no one, his voice hoarse. He couldn't tell if it was anger or fear that made his hands shake. "But I need to be there. I need to be in the room with him. This is my son." Laura's voice came through the phone, calm but firm. "I understand, but remember, Tom, the goal here is to get the truth, no matter how painful. Don't let your emotions cloud what's at stake." Tom didn't respond, his mind elsewhere, on the conversation he knew was coming, the confession he wasn't sure he could bear to hear. As he ended the call, his phone buzzed again, startling him. It was a text from Dana. "Tom, please come home. Ethan's spiraling. He's not himself. I don't know what to do anymore." Tom stared at the message, his heart sinking. Ethan, his son, the boy he'd tried to protect, now lost in a sea of lies and desperation. The web was tightening, and every thread pulled him further into a nightmare. He couldn't ignore it. He couldn't keep pretending everything was fine when it was falling apart at the seams. He typed a quick reply. "I'll be there soon. Just stay calm." Then, with a heavy sigh, he made his way out the door. The confrontation with Ethan was imminent. But first, he had to face Rachel. Tom arranged a meeting with her at a deserted coffee shop parking lot. It wasn't the kind of place he'd ever pictured having a conversation with his wife, but there was nothing normal about their life anymore. Nothing was as it had seemed. The lies, the secrets, they were suffocating him. But this was it. He had to get to the bottom of everything, no matter the cost. He arrived early, the early morning fog still clinging to the ground. He sat in his car, eyes darting to the rearview mirror, watching the parking lot for any sign of Rachel. He didn't know what he was expecting, but it wasn't this silence, this empty space that felt colder than it should. He'd spent so many years with Rachel, trusting her, loving her, and now he didn't even know who she was anymore. The minutes ticked by, each one heavier than the last. He tried to push the thoughts of Ethan's text out of his mind, but the guilt gnawed at him, mixing with his anger. He wasn't just angry at Ethan. He was angry at himself for not seeing it sooner, angry at Rachel for hiding it all from him. But most of all, he was angry at Martin Doyle and everything he had stolen from them. Finally, Rachel pulled into the lot, her car slowly rolling to a stop in front of him. Tom stepped out, his breath visible in the cold air. She looked tired, as if the weight of everything had settled into her bones, and she hadn't been able to shake it off. "Tom," she said quietly, not meeting his eyes as she approached. Tom didn't speak right away. He just looked at her, seeing the woman he thought he knew, but now realizing he had never really known her at all. "Rachel," he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "What happened? How did we get here?" She met his gaze then, and he saw the pain in her eyes. "I didn't mean for it to go this far, Tom. I swear I didn't. I thought I was protecting us. I thought I was protecting Ethan." Tom's heart twisted at her words, but the anger still burned, hot and raw. "Protecting us," he repeated, shaking his head. "You've destroyed us, Rachel. Do you even realize that?" She flinched at his words, but Tom couldn't stop himself. "How could you let this happen? You, of all people, should have known better." She looked down at her feet, and when she spoke again, her voice trembled. "I didn't want to tell you. I didn't want to drag you into this, but it's all gone too far. Ethan's in so much debt, Tom, and I didn't know how to fix it. I thought maybe, if I got involved with Doyle, I could protect him, but it was a mistake. I should have come to you sooner." Tom's world seemed to tilt. He felt the ground shifting beneath him. Ethan, the debts, the lies. The realization hit him like a freight train. It wasn't just about Rachel anymore. It wasn't just about his wife's betrayal. Ethan had been living in a nightmare of his own, and Tom had been blind to it. Suddenly, Dana appeared, walking toward him with her head down, her hands clasped tightly together. She looked exhausted, as if the weight of everything had finally caught up with her. Her eyes were red, tears streaking down her face. "I'm sorry," Dana said, her voice barely audible. "I should have told you sooner. I didn't know how to say it. Ethan, he forged your signature on a $120,000 medical loan. He's been hiding it from you." Tom felt the blood drain from his face. A $120,000 loan, forged signatures. Ethan had crossed a line he couldn't come back from. The world seemed to close in around Tom. He felt betrayed by both his wife and his son, but something deeper took hold of him, something that felt like a tightening knot in his chest. They were all caught in this web of financial ruin, tangled in lies they couldn't escape. The truth was out now, but it was far from over. As Dana's words settled over him, Tom realized he had reached a breaking point. He had no choice now. The confrontation with Ethan was inevitable, and there was no escaping the consequences of their actions. The question wasn't whether he could forgive them. It was whether he could survive the storm that was coming. Tom sat on the edge of the couch, the weight of the world pressing down on him. The room was too quiet. the silence heavy with the words that hung between him and Dana. His hands trembled as he clutched the sides of the couch, trying to steady himself. His mind was reeling. Every word, every piece of the puzzle was pushing him further into a corner. The truth was coming at him in waves, each one more painful than the last. Dana stood across from him, her face pale, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. She had always been strong, the pillar of the family, the one who held everything together. But now, in this moment, she looked smaller, broken. Tom could see it in her eyes, the weight of the secret she had been carrying for so long. He could feel the tremor in the air, the unbearable tension of the truth that was finally coming out. "I should have told you, Tom," Dana said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I couldn't. I was scared of what Ethan would do. He promised me it was temporary. He said he'd fix it, that he'd get the money back soon. But I didn't know it would get this bad." Tom's heart clenched as he listened to her, the words like daggers piercing through him. The betrayal was sharp, but it was different from the anger he had expected. It wasn't rage, it was heartbreak. His wife, the woman he had trusted above all others, had kept this secret from him. She had watched their son spiral into a world of lies and debt, and now everything was falling apart. "Why didn't you come to me, Dana?" Tom's voice cracked, the emotion pouring through as he spoke. "Why didn't you tell me? I could have helped. We could have figured this out together. You didn't have to carry this alone." Tears welled up in Dana's eyes as she shook her head. "I didn't know what to do. I thought if I just waited, if I kept it from you, it would all blow over. I didn't want to burden you with it." Ethan kept saying it was just a small loan, that it would be fine. But now it's too late. Tom stared at her, the weight of her words settling into his chest like a stone. He had always thought of his family as solid, unbreakable even. But now it was clear that everything he had believed was a lie. Ethan's debt, Rachel's involvement, the lies they had all told. It was too much to process. "Dana," Tom said, his voice rough with emotion. "How much does he owe? How bad is it?" Dana swallowed hard, her breath shallow as she looked away. $120,000. He signed for a loan, without your knowledge. The money was supposed to go toward a medical procedure, but it was all a scam, Tom, a fraud. And now the person behind it is demanding repayment. They want it immediately." Tom's stomach churned at the realization. $120,000. Gone. His son had lied to him, his wife had kept it a secret, and now they were all trapped in the aftermath of Ethan's choices. The fraudster, the person behind it all, was still out there, and they weren't going to let it slide. "I'm sorry," Dana whispered, her voice breaking. "I didn't know how to stop it. I didn't know how to fix it. I thought it would just go away." She wiped her eyes, her voice shaking with the weight of her guilt. "But it's too late now. They're not going to let this go." Tom felt the floor beneath him tilt, the enormity of the situation crashing down on him like a wave. He had known Ethan was in trouble, but this was far worse than anything he had imagined. A loan signed in his name, forged documents, fraud. How had things gotten this far? How had he missed all the signs? Detective Laura Jenkins, who had been silently listening from the corner of the room, stepped forward, pulling out a recorder. "Tom," she said, her voice steady but firm, "we need Dana's testimony. It's crucial for the investigation. She's now a cooperating witness in this case." Tom glanced over at Laura, her calm demeanor a stark contrast to the chaos in his mind. Dana had been the one to protect their family, the one who had kept the truth from him to shield them, all. But now she was just as deep in this mess as Ethan, and as him. This was no longer just a family crisis. This was criminal, and it had reached a point where they couldn't hide from it anymore. Tom nodded, his mind still spinning. "Okay," he said quietly. "We'll do whatever we need to do. I'll cooperate. But I need to speak to Ethan. I need to face him. I need him to come clean. Now." Dana looked at him, her eyes filled with sorrow. "Tom, please, be gentle with him. He didn't mean for it to go this far. He was just trying to protect us." Tom's heart ached at her words, but the reality was too great. Ethan had made a choice. And now, Tom had no choice but to confront the boy he'd raised, to hold him accountable for the damage he had caused. There was no going back from this. As the meeting ended and Detective Jenkins began the process of recording Dana's statement, Tom's mind raced. His son, his family, the future they had built, it was all on the line. And Tom knew that no matter how hard he tried to protect them, there was no escaping the consequences of their actions. The guilt was crushing, but the weight of responsibility was heavier still. Tom knew what he had to do next. He had to face Ethan head-on, force him to confront the truth, and stop the damage from escalating. The family's financial ruin wasn't just a burden, it was a ticking time bomb, and Tom was the only one left who could defuse it. But as he prepared to face his son, one thought gnawed at him. Would the truth be enough to save them, or would it destroy them forever? The sound of Tom's footsteps echoed through the empty house, a haunting reminder of how far everything had fallen. For the first time since the investigation began, he was home. But this wasn't a homecoming he had ever imagined. The place felt alien now, empty in a way that went beyond just the physical space. It was as if the walls themselves could feel the weight of the lies and secrets that had built up between him and the people he loved. The police officers flanked him, their presence a stark reminder that things had escalated beyond control. They were there for protection in case things went sideways. Detective Laura Jenkins walked beside him, her calm demeanor at odds with the tension that gripped Tom. She hadn't said much during the ride home, but Tom could tell she was bracing herself for what was about to unfold. The confrontation was inevitable, but that didn't make it any easier. As Tom stepped inside, the house seemed quieter than usual, the familiar surroundings now filled with an uncomfortable stillness. He could hear the faint sound of a television in the background, the muffled noise cutting through the silence like a knife. He stopped in the doorway to the living room, his heart tightening as he saw Ethan sitting on the couch, his face pale and drawn. Ethan looked up, his eyes widening in surprise when he saw his father standing there, flanked by police officers. The guilt was written all over his face, his panic barely concealed. The weight of his actions had caught up with him, and now there was no place left to hide. Tom stood there for a moment, just looking at his son. His mind was racing with a mixture of anger and heartbreak. The boy he had raised, the son he had trusted, was no longer the same. Ethan was different now, not just because of the lies, but because of what he had done. He had dragged them all into a dangerous world, one that Tom could never have imagined. "Tom, I didn't think," Ethan stammered, rising from the couch, his voice trembling with fear. "I didn't know how far it would go. I swear I was just trying to fix things, to help." Tom's eyes narrowed, the anger simmering just beneath the surface. He had heard enough of the excuses. This wasn't about help anymore. "We need to talk," Tom said, his voice calm but firm, his gaze never leaving Ethan. Ethan froze, his body stiffening, as if the words had hit him like a punch to the gut. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. His mind seemed to be scrambling for a way to explain himself, but he knew, deep down, there was no way to spin this anymore. I didn't mean for any of this to happen, Dad," Ethan finally managed, his voice cracking. "I was trying to protect the family. I was doing it for us, for you and Mom. I never thought it would get this bad. I didn't realize—" Tom shook his head slowly, disappointment and frustration building with every word Ethan spoke. "Protect us? Ethan, you've been lying to us. You've been involved in something far worse than you can even understand. This isn't about protection. It's about you trying to cover your own mess, and now we're all paying the price for it." Ethan's eyes darted around the room, searching for an escape, his panic rising with every passing second. He was trapped, and he knew it, but he couldn't admit it. Not yet, not until the truth was forced into his face. Before he could say anything else, there was a shift in the air. A subtle movement. Tom's eyes followed the movement, and his heart sank when he saw the man standing by the door. The fraudster, the one responsible for the mess that had consumed their lives, was trying to leave quickly, his face a mixture of guilt and urgency. But as he reached for the door, Detective Jenkins was already there, blocking his path. "Not so fast," Laura said, her voice cold and authoritative. The man stopped in his tracks, eyes widening in fear. He knew he was caught. Tom's chest tightened as the man turned to face him, his eyes darting nervously between Tom and the officers. He was a stranger to Tom, but in that moment, he represented everything that had gone wrong, everything that had unraveled his family's life. "What's your name?" Tom asked, his voice low and steady. He didn't care about the man's name anymore. What mattered was the truth, and the truth was staring him in the face. The fraudster didn't respond immediately, his mouth opening and closing as if he was weighing his options. But Laura stepped forward, her voice sharp. "You don't have a choice. You're coming with us. Everything you've done is about to catch up with you." Tom felt his breath catch as the man was handcuffed, his reality sinking in even further. This was it. The world his son had been living in, the one he had tried to shield himself from, was coming down around them, and now it was too late to run. Turning his attention back to Ethan, Tom took a deep breath and pulled out the documents he'd been holding on to tightly. Copies of the forged signatures, the loan applications, all the evidence that had been hidden from him. He placed them on the table between them, watching as Ethan's face fell when he saw them. The weight of the evidence hit him like a freight train, and for the first time, Ethan couldn't deny it. He had been caught. "I didn't want this, Dad," Ethan whispered, his voice breaking. His face crumpled as the realization settled in. "I didn't want to hurt you, but I've messed up so badly. I don't know how to fix it." Tom felt the truth sinking in, heavy and suffocating. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. This was about the consequences of their actions, and no amount of regret could undo the damage. The door to their future was closing fast, and there was nothing Tom could do to stop it. The truth had come out, but the cost was far higher than he'd ever expected. And as he stared at his son, the painful realization hit him. What now? The room was thick with tension, a silence that suffocated, waiting for the moment everything would come crashing down. Tom stood in the doorway of the living room, watching as Detective Laura Jenkins sat across from Ethan, her demeanor calm and controlled, a stark contrast to the storm swirling in Tom's chest. He wasn't sure he could even look at his son right now, let alone listen to whatever excuse Ethan had for the mess he'd created. But this was the moment they'd all been dreading. Ethan was about to face the consequences of his actions, and Tom had to be there to hear it. Ethan sat slumped in the chair, his face pale, his hands twisted together in his lap. His eyes darted nervously around the room, avoiding his father's gaze. The guilt was written all over him, but there was something else too, something darker, something that hinted at a fear so deep that it made Tom's heart twist in ways he didn't think he was capable of feeling anymore. "Ethan," Detective Jenkins said, her voice soft but firm, "we know what you've done. It's time to come clean. This is your chance to tell us the truth." Ethan swallowed hard, his throat tight, as if the words he needed to say were stuck, lodged somewhere deep inside. Tom could feel his son's fear, could see the way his hands shook, but he wasn't sure if it was fear of being caught or fear of what would happen next. The realization gnawed at Tom. Ethan had already lost everything, and now he was going to lose even more. I didn't mean for it to go this far," Ethan muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. He finally looked at his father, his eyes full of regret, but there was a defensiveness there too, something he couldn't quite shake. I didn't know how to fix it. I thought I could fix it on my own. I thought the money would come through, but it didn't." Tom's fists clenched at his sides, his heart hammering in his chest. The words were too much. The lies. The secrecy. Everything was collapsing around him, and there was nothing left but the broken pieces. But he held his breath, forcing himself to stay silent, to let Ethan speak, to let him confess. I forged your signature, Dad," Ethan continued, his voice shaking now, as if saying it out loud somehow made it all real. "I needed the money. The debts were mounting, and I didn't think you'd go for it if I asked. So I signed it for you. I thought it would be temporary, you know? I thought I'd pay it back soon. I was desperate, Dad. You don't understand what it's like to feel like you're drowning and have no way out." The words hit Tom like a punch to the stomach, and for a moment, he couldn't breathe. Forged signatures. His own son had lied, had taken something from him that was irreplaceable. His trust. The anger started to rise, but it wasn't enough to override the deep, aching sorrow that settled into his chest. How had they gotten here? Dana, standing silently by the doorway, let out a choked sob, tears streaming down her face. She wiped her eyes quickly, but it didn't do much to hide the anguish in them. Her hands trembled at her sides, but she didn't speak. She just stood there, her gaze fixed on Ethan, as if trying to comprehend the depth of his desperation. Ethan's voice broke again, and this time it was laced with something deeper, something that spoke of his shame and his fear. I didn't want to hurt you. I never wanted to hurt anyone, but I couldn't stop. I thought I could fix it on my own, and I kept lying because I didn't want you to hate me. I just wanted to protect the family, to make everything okay. Tom's chest tightened as he listened. Protect the family? Ethan had thought his actions were protecting them, but all he had done was lead them deeper into a nightmare. Tom's face softened with a mix of sorrow and disbelief. He didn't know what to feel anymore. The anger was there, but it was swallowed up by something else, something more painful. This was his son, his flesh and blood. But he had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. As Ethan wiped his eyes, his shoulders slumped in defeat, Tom caught something else in the room. The fraudster, the man behind the loan, the one who had pulled Ethan into this mess, had been silent until now. He shifted uneasily in the corner, but before he could try to slip away, Detective Jenkins stepped forward, her gaze sharp and cold. "Where do you think you're going?" she asked, her voice firm. The fraudster froze, his face paling as Jenkins approached him, but he didn't answer. He wasn't going anywhere. "Tell him, Ethan," Jenkins pressed, her tone low and menacing. "Tell him what you promised. Tell your father what you gave them in exchange for that loan." Ethan's face went white. He shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his mouth opening and closing, struggling for words. Finally, he mumbled, barely above a whisper, I promised them collateral. I promised them your identity. I didn't think they'd actually use it. I thought I could fix it before they did." The words struck Tom like a slap to the face. His identity. His own son had used him as collateral in a loan. He felt the blood drain from his face, his body going cold. He had trusted Ethan, had protected him his whole life. And now Ethan had dragged him into a world of fraud and criminality. Tom's fists clenched tighter, but he couldn't speak. He couldn't find the words. It was at that moment that Ethan collapsed, his body shaking with sobs. "I didn't want to hurt you, Dad," he cried, the tears streaming down his face. "I didn't want to destroy everything. I thought I could fix it before you found out. I'm so sorry, Tom's voice cut through the air, low and deliberate. "But you did, Ethan," he said, the words heavy, almost too much to bear. "You did hurt us. You've destroyed everything." Detective Jenkins moved to Ethan's side, calmly reading him his rights, the final step in a long, painful process. As she spoke, Tom stood there, frozen, the weight of his son's confession pressing down on him. This was the beginning of the end, for Ethan, for their family, and for everything they had known. As the words hung in the air, Tom knew one thing for certain. The road ahead would be long, and it would be filled with more pain and decisions he didn't want to make. But he had no choice now. The truth had come out, and there was no going back. The air felt heavy with the weight of finality as the police led the fraudster away, his hands cuffed behind his back, the man's face devoid of emotion. Detective Jenkins stood beside Tom, her expression unreadable as the officers filed past them. It had all come to this, the culmination of months of lies, deceit, and broken trust. The fraudster had been caught, but that didn't mean anything was fixed. No, the damage had already been done. Tom's chest tightened as he watched the man being shoved into the back of a police car. The same man who had been at the center of their financial destruction, whose schemes had entangled Ethan and Rachel in a web they couldn't escape. Tom had hoped this day would come sooner, but now that it had, all he felt was emptiness. "He's going to jail, Tom," Jenkins said quietly, her voice almost lost in the hum of the city around them. "He's not getting away with it." Tom didn't respond at first. The words had no weight, They couldn't fix what had already been broken. His gaze lingered on the car as it pulled away, the flash of the police lights reflecting off the pavement. Ethan had done this. Ethan, his son, the boy he had raised, the boy he had trusted. And now, that same boy was about to pay the price for his actions. Tom turned away from the scene, his heart heavy, his mind still spinning. He didn't know what to feel anymore. Anger, betrayal, sorrow. It was all a confusing blur. He just knew one thing. His family was shattered, and nothing would ever be the same. Inside the house, things were moving fast. The police had taken Dana's statement, and though she tried to hold it together, her voice trembled with emotion as she spoke to the officers. Tom stood nearby, but his attention drifted, the weight of her words almost too much to bear. She was finally telling the truth, laying bare the secret she had kept hidden for so long. He could see the relief in her eyes, but there was no joy in it, no satisfaction, only a kind of devastation. She was free, but at what cost? "I never wanted this to happen, Tom," Dana whispered, her eyes downcast as she finished speaking to the officers. "I just wanted to protect Ethan. I never imagined it would end like this." Tom's throat tightened. He hadn't imagined it either. He hadn't imagined any of it. A small part of him understood her desperation. He had been desperate too, trying to save his family from the collapse they were all hurtling toward. But the truth was inescapable. They had all been complicit in some way, and now there was no undoing the damage. A moment later, Liam Carter, their attorney, walked into the room, his expression all business. "We've finalized the protective orders, Tom," he said, his voice low but confident. "Your assets are safeguarded now. No more damage can be done through your finances." Tom nodded mechanically, his gaze flickering to the stack of documents in Liam's hands. It should have been a relief, but it wasn't. All the financial safeguards in the world couldn't protect him from the emotional wreckage that was left in the wake of his son's betrayal. He could protect his money, but how did he protect what was left of his family? Detective Jenkins followed Liam into the room, her expression more somber than usual. "We're putting long-term safety measures in place for you and your family, Tom," she said. "Surveillance, security protocols. You'll be protected. We won't let them get to you." Tom appreciated the offer, but it felt hollow. He wasn't afraid of what Martin Doyle's associates might do to him. He was afraid of what his own son had already done to them all. The danger wasn't out there. It was sitting in his own home, breathing the same air. "Thanks, Laura," Tom said quietly, his voice distant. "I'm not worried about the physical threats. I'm worried about everything else." Laura nodded, her eyes softening for a moment, but she didn't say anything more. There were no words for what Tom was feeling, no words that could take away the betrayal, the anger, or the guilt that was gnawing at him. As the officers filed out and the house grew quieter, Tom's thoughts turned back to Ethan. He hadn't been allowed to speak to him in the hours leading up to this, but now the reality of his son's arrest was setting in. He had never imagined he'd see the day when Ethan would be led away in handcuffs, caught in the tangled mess of his own making. The sound of a car pulling up outside drew Tom's attention. He didn't need to look out the window to know who it was. Ethan was about to be released on bail, thanks to his cooperation with the investigation, but Tom knew, deep down, it didn't matter. The damage was done, and this was just the beginning of a long, painful process. Tom stood by the window, staring out at the car that would carry his son away from him, the weight of the moment pressing down on him like a vice. He couldn't reconcile the boy he'd raised with the man who had betrayed him. Ethan's face, full of guilt and fear, was all Tom could see now. He wanted to reach out, to hold him, to tell him everything would be okay, but he couldn't. As the police car drove away, Tom's heart broke. He had been fighting to protect his family, to shield them from the world's dangers, but now he realized the greatest threat had come from within. The trust he'd built with Ethan had shattered, and Tom didn't know how to put it back together. The car turned the corner and disappeared from view, and in its wake, a profound sadness settled over Tom. He couldn't fix what had been broken. His son was lost in a world of his own making, and Tom had no idea if they could ever find their way back. The pursuit of protecting his family had cost him more than he could have ever imagined, and the hardest part was knowing that there was no turning back now. The door slammed shut behind him as Dana entered the room, her eyes red from crying. But Tom didn't have the strength to speak. Instead, they stood together, silently, the weight of the loss hanging between them, knowing that no matter how much they wanted to protect their family, the damage had already been done. The only question now was how they would survive the fallout. Tom sat at his desk, the weight of the world pressing down on him. The papers scattered before him were just the beginning, proof of the financial wreckage that had been wrought by Ethan's mistakes. His son, his flesh and blood, had dragged them all into this nightmare, and now Tom was left to pick up the pieces. But where did he even begin? Liam Carter, his attorney, was on the phone with the credit agencies, working tirelessly to freeze all activity on their accounts. The relief of knowing that their financial hemorrhaging was temporarily halted should have brought Tom some peace, but it didn't. There was still so much to repair, so much that had been broken. Trust, security, his family's future. Liam's voice brought him back to reality. "I've got the freeze in place, Tom. Nothing can be moved right now. We'll work through the process slowly, but it'll take time." Tom nodded, trying to focus on the practical steps ahead. He had always been good at handling the business side of life, managing investments, building their future, securing a comfortable retirement. But this was different. This was personal. This was his family, his son, who had caused all this destruction. He didn't know if he could ever fully repair the damage, but he had to try. For his family. For himself. "Thanks, Liam," Tom muttered, his voice hollow. "Let me know what the next steps are." He hung up the phone and sat back in his chair, the sound of the clock ticking louder than ever. His mind kept circling back to Ethan. His son was cooperating with authorities, but that didn't mean anything had been fixed yet. Tom had no idea how they could ever repair their relationship, how they could ever rebuild the trust that had been shattered. All he could do now was move forward, step by painful step. The phone buzzed again, breaking his thoughts. This time, it was Dr. Maya Lowe. Tom had reached out to her a few days ago, knowing the damage Ethan had caused extended beyond just the financial world. Ethan had used his father's identity in the scam, and now Tom needed to make sure his medical identity records were corrected before any further harm was done. "Maya," Tom answered, trying to mask the exhaustion in his voice. "Tom, I've made the necessary corrections." Maya's voice was calm but reassuring. "All medical records that were compromised under your name have been corrected. I've also placed a watch on your identity to ensure nothing else is tampered with. There should be no further issues." Tom let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. It was a small victory, but it didn't feel like enough. "Thank you," he said, the weight of his situation making him feel almost lifeless. "But I don't know how to move forward. Everything's just broken." "Take it one step at a time," Maya replied, her voice softening. "You're doing what you can to protect yourself. That's all you can do right now." Tom nodded, even though Maya couldn't see him. He appreciated her help, but he knew the real challenge wasn't going to be fixing his finances or medical records. It was rebuilding his life, his family, the things that had felt unshakable. His mind wandered to Dana. She had left the house, staying with her sister temporarily. Tom hadn't argued with her decision. She needed space, time to reflect, to heal. He couldn't imagine how she was feeling, having to live with the guilt of everything that had happened. But Tom knew that their relationship needed time and distance too. They needed to process everything, not just as a couple, but as individuals. Sighing, Tom stood up and walked over to the small desk by the window. He reached for the notebook he'd started journaling in, hoping it might help him make sense of the chaos. The past few weeks had been a blur. His son's arrest, the mounting debts, the betrayal from both his wife and child. The world he knew had fractured, and now he was left picking up pieces. He opened to the next blank page and began writing. The words came slowly at first, but then they started to flow. How did we get here? How did I miss all the signs? Ethan was just trying to fix things, but he only made it worse. I wish I could be angry, but it's not anger I feel. It's this empty space. I feel like I'm drowning in it. Writing didn't make the pain go away, but it helped. For the first time in weeks, he felt like he was starting to breathe again, to regain some sense of control. As he wrote, his thoughts kept drifting back to Ethan. Where was he now? What was he thinking? Just as he was about to put the pen down, the phone rang again. Detective Jenkins. Tom picked it up immediately, hoping for some kind of clarity. Tom, Laura's voice was calm, but there was something in it that made his stomach tighten. I wanted to update you. Ethan is cooperating fully with the authorities. He's confessed everything, and he's starting the restitution process. It's going to be a long road, but he's taking responsibility for his actions. Tom leaned back in his chair, the weight of the words sinking in. Ethan was doing what he could to make things right, but Tom knew it would never be enough. There would never be a way to undo the damage, the betrayal. And yet, a small part of him, the part he didn't want to acknowledge, was relieved that his son was trying to make amends. Thank you, Laura, Tom said, his voice quieter now. Let me know if anything else changes. As the call ended, Tom sat back in his chair, staring at the empty pages of his notebook. The road ahead was long, and he didn't know where it would lead. But one thing was clear. Nothing would ever be the same. And just as Tom thought he might find a moment of peace, the next wave of reality hit him. Ethan's restitution was only the beginning. How would they all survive the fallout of this? How would they move forward? The story was far from over, and Tom knew that the hardest chapters were yet to come. The courtroom was suffocatingly quiet as Ethan stood before the judge, his face pale and strained, his hands trembling slightly as they gripped the edges of the defendant's table. The room felt colder than it should, the weight of the past few months settling into Tom's chest like a rock. This was the moment, the one he had feared, the one that had hung over his family since the moment Ethan's actions had been revealed. Tom sat in the back of the room, his eyes fixed on his son, but his mind was elsewhere. There was no going back now. Ethan faced the charges: identity theft, forgery, fraud. The crimes that had torn their lives apart, the ones he had never imagined his son capable of committing. Yet here they were, the cold reality of the situation etched into the lines of his face. The defense attorney stood and made the case for leniency, but Tom could barely listen. All he could hear were the words Ethan had said in their home when he first confessed, "I didn't want to hurt you." It was clear now that nothing would ever undo the damage. The question was, what would happen next? Ethan's voice was shaky as he finally spoke. "Your Honor," he began, his eyes briefly flicking to the judge, then down to the table as if he couldn't bear to face anyone. "I plead guilty. I never meant for any of this to happen. The pressure from my debts, from everything I had to cover up, it was too much. I thought I could fix it. I thought it would all go away. But it didn't. And now, I see the pain I've caused my family, and I regret it deeply. I'm asking for leniency. I wasn't thinking straight when I made those decisions. Please, please consider what I've been through." His words hung in the air, their sincerity evident, but they didn't change the facts. They didn't change what Ethan had done, what they had all been dragged into. Tom's fists clenched in his lap as he tried to swallow the anger, the grief, the confusion that twisted inside him. Ethan had been under pressure. He had been desperate, but that didn't make what he had done any less wrong. Dana, sitting just a few feet away, wiped away a tear as she was called to the stand. Tom's gaze flickered briefly to her, seeing the pain in her eyes as she stood up, her hands shaking. She had been through so much, the lies, the secret, the fear of losing everything, and now she had to relive it all. But Dana was strong. Tom had always known that about her. Despite the hurt, she would stand tall. Her voice wavered as she spoke, but there was a steel to it that made Tom proud. "I knew something was wrong," Dana began, her voice cracking, but she steadied herself. "I didn't know the full extent of it, but I knew my son was struggling. He kept telling me it was a temporary thing, that it would all be fixed. I never thought he would go this far. When I found out the truth, I was devastated. But I know that Ethan is a good person. He's not a criminal. He was just trying to protect us, and he made a mistake, a huge one. But that doesn't mean he's lost. He's my son, and I love him." Tom sat in the back, listening to Dana's words, and felt a pang of guilt deep in his chest. A mistake. That was what it had been, wasn't it? His son had made a mistake, one that had grown far beyond his control. And yet, despite the betrayal, despite the deceit, there was still a piece of Tom that wanted to believe in the boy he had raised. But the reality was that this wasn't just a mistake. This was something more, something that couldn't be undone with love alone. His heart beat painfully in his chest as he locked eyes with Ethan across the room. The guilt in his son's eyes was impossible to ignore. Ethan was a broken shell of the young man Tom had once known. There were no more excuses, no more lies to hide behind. The truth had come crashing down, and now they all had to face it. The judge finally spoke, her voice stern, but not without a hint of empathy. "Ethan Harper, you have admitted to serious crimes, crimes that have caused irreversible harm to your family and others. However, your willingness to take responsibility for your actions, your cooperation with authorities, and your admission of guilt speak to your potential for rehabilitation. Given your circumstances, I am ordering you into a rehabilitation program rather than jail time, with the hope that you will turn your life around." Tom's stomach tightened as the words settled in. He had known this was a possibility. He had known that his son's fate could be different from the harsh punishment he had feared, but it didn't bring the relief he thought it would. Instead, all Tom felt was emptiness, the hollow echo of everything they had lost. Ethan's face went pale as the judge made her ruling. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but closed it again, his emotions too much to put into words. The relief was there, faint but undeniable, but it was overshadowed by something else. Ethan wasn't free. He wasn't forgiven. This was just the beginning of a long road to redemption, and Tom had no idea if his son would ever truly find his way back. As the courtroom began to clear, Tom stayed in his seat, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He could feel the eyes of the others around him, the officers, the witnesses, even Dana, but he couldn't tear his gaze away from Ethan. His son was leaving the courtroom, a free man for now. But Tom knew the true cost of that freedom. The shame, the guilt, the emotional scars, they would follow them all forever. Ethan, still silent, looked at Tom once more, his voice cracking as he said, "I'm sorry, Dad. I never meant for any of this to happen." Tom's throat tightened, the words stuck in his chest. "I know," he wanted to say, but he couldn't bring himself to speak. The pain of what had happened was too raw, too fresh. As Ethan was led out of the courtroom, Tom felt a crushing sense of loss, the finality of it all settling in. His son had been given a chance to start over, but it felt like Tom had already lost him. The road ahead was uncertain, and Tom didn't know if they could ever truly repair the rift between them. But for now, all Tom could do was sit there, watching as his son was led away, feeling the weight of the world on his shoulders. The real work, the painful, difficult work, was just beginning, and Tom had no idea if he could survive the journey ahead. The quiet of the house felt strange to Tom. For the first time in what seemed like forever, there was no yelling, no hiding, no tension hanging in the air. It wasn't peace, exactly, not yet, but it was something he hadn't had in months. The storm had passed, but the aftermath was heavy. Tom sat at the kitchen table, the bills and documents spread before him, each one another step in the long process of rebuilding. His mind still drifted to the court hearing, to Ethan, to the weight of what had happened to them all. But for the first time in months, he felt like he was starting to move forward, slowly, cautiously, but moving nonetheless. The financial stability was the first priority. It had to be. The damage was done, but the accounts were frozen, the protective orders in place. Liam had been working with him on slowly getting everything back in order, contacting creditors and piecing together the mess. It wasn't fast, but it was progress. The weight that had been crushing Tom's chest for so long, the constant fear of financial ruin, was finally starting to lift, one slow step at a time. Dana's return home felt like another step forward, but it was fragile. She walked into the house like a stranger, cautiously testing the waters, her eyes filled with remorse and guilt. She wasn't the same person who had left weeks ago. The process of rebuilding trust between them was as slow and deliberate as the financial recovery. Tom didn't know if they would ever be able to fully put everything behind them, but he knew one thing: he couldn't keep living in this broken place. They had to start somewhere. Dana's voice broke the silence. "I'm sorry, Tom," she said softly, her eyes red and tired. "I never should have kept it from you. I've learned so much through all of this. I can't change the past, but I want to help rebuild what's left." Tom looked at her, the words swirling in his mind, but he didn't speak at first. He had heard her apologies before, but this felt different. There was something more real about it this time. But forgiveness wasn't easy. Trust wasn't something he could just hand back to her. Not yet. "It's going to take time," he finally said, his voice low. "I'm not sure I can ever forget what happened, but we have to work on it together. We need to rebuild this slowly." Dana nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek as she sat beside him. They both knew the road ahead was uncertain. There were no guarantees, no promises that it would ever be like it was before, but there was a shared understanding between them that hadn't been there before. This was the start of something new, even if it was still fragile. A few weeks later, Tom and Dana sat in a counselor's office, the soft hum of the air conditioning the only sound filling the space. The counselor was calm, empathetic, asking questions that were hard to answer. "How did it feel to keep that secret for so long?" the counselor asked Dana. Dana's voice broke as she responded. "It felt like I was protecting Tom, protecting our family. But I see now that I only made things worse. I didn't think about the consequences. I was scared." Tom sat silently, his eyes on Dana, his heart still heavy. The emotional weight of the last few months was hard to put into words. There were so many layers to their relationship, so many cracks that had formed and broken apart. But this was the only way forward, one step at a time. He wasn't ready to forgive her fully, but he was learning to forgive the pain, to move past the betrayal. He set boundaries, clear ones. Trust wasn't something that could be rushed, but Dana's remorse, her willingness to rebuild with him, was a start. Ethan, too, was beginning the long process of rebuilding. He had entered a financial responsibility program mandated by the court as part of his restitution process. Tom didn't know how it would end, but he knew that Ethan was trying. That was something, at least. The first steps in redemption were slow and painful, but Ethan was showing up. Tom didn't know if his son could ever regain what had been lost, but there was a flicker of hope now, a glimmer of possibility that hadn't existed before. The healing process was still far from complete, but there were moments, small ones, where Tom felt like he could breathe again. One evening, Alice, his sister, invited them all over for a small dinner, a celebration of sorts. She said it was to mark Tom's safety, a recognition of the family's tentative healing. The dinner was modest, but it was a moment of peace, a small gathering of people who loved each other, despite everything that had happened. Tom sat at the table, surrounded by family, and for the first time in months, he allowed himself a breath of gratitude. His mind still ached with the weight of the past, with everything they had lost, but there was something in the air that night, a quiet sense of progress. The truth had come to light, as painful as it had been, but it had also cleared the air, brought the family closer in a way that was hard to explain. As the night wore on and they shared stories and laughter, Tom found himself thinking about the road ahead. It would be long, it would be difficult, but there was a chance for them to rebuild, to find peace, to move forward, and that, for now, was enough. The night ended, and Tom stood at the doorway, looking out into the dark street. The world felt still, like a breath held in anticipation. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to face, more to confront. But for the first time in a long time, he felt a quiet sense of resolve. The healing wasn't over, but it had begun. And in the silence of that moment, Tom knew that the hardest part was behind him. But as he turned to close the door, he couldn't ignore the nagging feeling in the back of his mind. The storm had passed, but was it truly over? The future was uncertain, and Tom knew that the next chapter of their story was still unwritten. The night had settled into a quiet, reflective stillness, the kind of night that wraps around you like a soft, cool blanket. Tom stood in the small cafe, waiting for Dr. Maya Lowe to arrive. It had been months since their paths had crossed in the whirlwind of chaos that had nearly destroyed his family. But now, standing in the dim glow of the cafe's warm lights, Tom was here to finally thank her. He owed her so much more than words could convey. When Maya entered, her calm presence immediately put him at ease. She was no longer the anonymous figure behind the scenes. Now, she felt like a lifeline. Someone who had stood in the gap when Tom had been blind to the storm brewing beneath his family's surface. "Tom?" she greeted him with a nod, taking a seat across from him. "I'm glad you called. How have you been?" Tom gave a small, rueful smile. "I've been better. It's been a long road, but we're getting there. I owe you a lot. What you did, saving my identity, stopping the fraud from going further, you saved my future." Maya sighed, leaning back in her chair. "I just did what needed to be done," she said, her voice steady but tinged with concern. "I feared you'd be blamed for everything. I couldn't let that happen. Not after all the work you've done. Not after the trust you'd built with your family. You were a victim too, Tom. You didn't deserve to carry that burden." Tom nodded, his thoughts drifting back to the early days of the investigation when he had no idea how deep the lies had gone, how much damage had been done. "I had no idea, Maya. I was so caught up in what Ethan was doing, in trying to hold everything together. I didn't realize how much I was losing, how close I came to losing everything, including my family's future." The weight of those words settled heavily on Tom. His entire life had been built on the foundation of trust, his business, his marriage, his relationship with Ethan, and that foundation had cracked. Ethan had betrayed him. Dana had kept secrets. And yet, here he was, slowly starting to rebuild it all, slowly beginning to see that perhaps there was a way forward. But how much damage could be undone? Maya looked at him thoughtfully, her eyes serious. "You almost lost everything, Tom. Your financial future, your family. You were trapped in a web of deceit, and it could have gone very differently. If I hadn't acted when I did, if I hadn't uncovered the fraud, if I hadn't been quick to intervene, you'd be facing charges too. The entire fraud might have been pinned on you." Tom's heart raced as the realization hit him like a physical blow. He had almost been completely blind to how close he had come to losing everything: his identity, his assets, and even the law's perception of him. A deep breath escaped him as the full scope of his vulnerability settled in. But there was something else, something that had been lingering in his mind since everything had started, something that had confused him from the beginning, the mysterious note that had saved him. The words that had appeared on his desk, the words that had seemed like a cryptic message from someone he didn't understand at the time. "Don't go home. Run." "Maya," Tom said, his voice quieter now, almost hesitant. "I need to ask you something. The note, the one that showed up at my office. It was a warning, wasn't it? A warning that someone knew what was happening to me, knew what Ethan was involved in. Was it you? Did you send it?" Maya paused, her gaze intense, as if measuring her words. "I didn't send it," she said finally, her voice calm, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes. "But I knew you were in danger. That's why I acted so quickly. I couldn't risk you becoming another victim in this mess. Someone out there was trying to help you, Tom. Whoever wrote that note knew exactly what you were walking into." Tom felt a shiver run down his spine as the weight of that truth sank in. Whoever had written it had been a shadow in the background, a silent ally who had known the danger before Tom had. "Run." The words echoed in his mind. It had saved his life. It had saved his future. "I don't know who they were," Maya continued, her voice softer now. "But you got the message in time. It was meant to be a turning point, and you took it. You did what you had to do." Tom leaned back, letting the magnitude of it all wash over him. "I owe them too," he muttered, his mind still racing. "I'll never know who it was. But they did what I couldn't." The weight of the conversation, of everything that had happened, pressed down on Tom as he sat in the quiet cafe with Maya. The pain was still fresh. But he could see it now, everything that had led him to this point. He was standing on the edge of something uncertain, but it was a chance to rebuild. It wasn't a guarantee, but it was real. Later that evening, Dana joined Tom for a walk by the river. It was a cold evening, the air crisp and clear, but the tranquility of the moment felt like a brief respite. The sounds of the water flowing, the rustle of the trees, helped Tom clear his head. They walked side by side, the distance between them still a bit too wide but shrinking. "I've been thinking a lot, Tom," Dana said, her voice low, her words careful. "About everything. About what we've been through, the lies, the mistakes, but mostly about what we need to do to heal. We've been through hell, and I know we've hurt each other. But we can't rebuild if we don't start with honesty. Nothing else works without it." Tom looked at her, the sincerity in her voice bringing a measure of peace to his chest. "We rebuild from honesty. Nothing else," he said softly, his voice filled with a quiet determination. Dana smiled, a small, bittersweet expression, and they continued walking side by side. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't all fixed, but it was a start. And for the first time in months, Tom allowed himself to feel a fragile sense of hope. The journey wasn't over, but at least they were walking towards something. As they continued their walk, Tom couldn't shake the feeling that something else was still looming just out of sight. But for tonight, for this moment, he would allow himself to believe that they were on the path to recovery, even if that path was uncertain and fraught with challenges. The truth had come to light. Now, it was up to them to face the future together.